420 Radio is brought to you by Sacred Serum, who is focused on creating elegant and sophisticated cannabis solutions through its line of dispensers and vaporizers that come preloaded with the world's finest cannabis concentrate. Sacred Serum's concentrate is made on pharmaceutical-grade supercritical CO2 extraction machines that use absolutely no butane or other toxic chemicals. The Vesica, the company's innovative new way to dab and frost, is now available in dispensaries across California. Sacred Serum, elegance and sophistication.
420 Radio, your ticket to the Boston Freedom Rally. The fingerboard extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The fingerboard extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The fingerboard extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the fingerboard extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com.
All right, we want to address speaking to diverse political audiences and legislators. The social psych literature on introductions basically says here's a chance to persuade people that this person's an expert without that person actually having to call himself an expert and look like a narcissistic fool. With Eric Sterling, I feel like the fool. Here's a guy who has spent his whole life, if I had to sum it up in a couple of words, fairness and reason. We've seen him just do amazing things about criminal law. He's been president of the Criminal Justice Society since 1989. He's got more legal awards than I can count. We worked on the MPP board together and got out of it together. The man is just an astounding contributor and spent his whole life doing this. I feel like I can't do him justice and I don't want to take away his time. So let's have a warm, normal welcome for Eric Sterling.
Can people hear me? Mitch, thank you very much.
It's really a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. It is enormously gratifying to me to have an opportunity to speak to Normal at this lobby day. Mitch didn't say that in 1976, when I met Keith and Bob Randall in Philadelphia, that it changed my life. I'd just like a show of hands. How many of you has your membership in Normal changed your life? Right. You know, for me, I was finishing law school, and I had, became involved with Normal, and I've been involved my entire legal career, my entire adult life, and it has been such a rewarding pursuit for me. I mean, I'm sure many of you have this experience that, you're meeting people and, what do you do? And people sort of say, well, thank God, God bless you. What you're doing is really good. And to have that kind of feedback from your work is a rare thing, especially if you're a lawyer. And I am so thankful to Keith Stropp. I'm so thankful for Normal for setting me on a course to do this work. The first conference I went to was in December 1976 at the Hyatt Regency Capitol Hill. And Jimmy Carter was not yet president. Gerry Ford was still the president. Carter had been elected, and decriminalization had been part of his agenda. And Normal is in the premier hotel on Capitol Hill. It's a new Hyatt Regency hotel. And I'm totally blown away. This is the marijuana movement. This was amazing. And then to go to the continuing legal education programs as having been a member of the bar for exactly 2 months, and to see Michael Kennedy and Michael Stepanian and Jerry Goldstein and Alan Ellis and Dick Atkins. I mean, I could name men and women who were these phenomenal lawyers, and geez, someday, if I could ever be in their ranks, or, then I will have accomplished, and completed sort of my legal preparation. And to be, here at Normal, today is just a thrill. I want to talk to you then about sort of, what we're here about, which is lobbying and talking to diverse audiences, because I guess I've done it a little bit. So the thing that you want to first think about, is why are you speaking? Who are you speaking to? And, did you get an invitation? Are you setting it up? And so here are the different, tried to think of what are some of the kinds of contexts that you might be speaking to. And so, just kind of going through the list, obviously you want to sort of generally think about, who you're educating. And just as you look at that first list there, in terms of your general audiences, you've got a whole bunch of sort of different actors. Let's take a detour for a moment and talk about business, because I have here from an op-ed I wrote for Forbes. Lauren, if you could share this just on this side of the room here, and I'll give you a bunch, and I'll give you some, and you can sort of pass them back. And so for a long time, I've been, it's a question of sort of thinking about who are the allies, who brings muscle into the legislative process. And that's really the business community. If you're the Speaker of the House and the head of the Chamber of Commerce calls you up, or the head of the Association of Manufacturers, you're going to take the call. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you're going to take the call. And so we need to speak language to sort of mobilize them. And so I'm a full-out drug legalizer. Anybody here a full-out drug legalizer? Okay, so we're not just talking about pot, we're talking about prohibition. And prohibition hurts all of America. It hurts the rich more than it hurts the poor. Because the rich, their investments are all being stunted by the enormous costs that prohibition generates. And when we get the rich on our side, no matter what your politics are, they're going to help change prohibition. And so this is an example of speaking to an audience that we usually don't sort of think about talking to. These are other kinds of contexts. I'll talk about them now. So obviously, when you're going to be speaking, you got to do homework. You want to talk to the organizer. When Alan said, Eric, will you talk to me? I call Alan. So what are we going to talk about? What's the venue like? I knew this venue. I asked the gentleman here for a lavalier mic so I can walk around. I don't have to stand at the podium and be boring. I can move around. I can pass stuff out. If you have that kind of flexibility, then you want to look for it. Sometimes you have to sit at the table. Shit, you're sitting at the table. You can barely project. If you have the chance, stand up, even if you're at the table, because you project, because you can breathe more easily, because you can be more dynamic. So when you have the chance, always stand when you're going to speak. You want to know sort of what's it part of? Is the speaking thing, is it part of a panel? Is it part of, where does it all fit in the process? So you have an idea. Are you beginning the thing? Are you ending the thing? How large is the audience? How much literature do you need to bring? So those are, think. You speak to a class. How many of you have been invited to speak to a class? So, obviously, common kind of context. Students are very interested. So you want to figure out, does this fit into a syllabus? You want to know, does the teacher, are the students going to be graded on what you said? Is it part of an assignment? Or you're part of a show? Is it entertaining? Can you suggest relevant readings? You're a tremendous help when you tell the teacher or the professor, here are a couple of good articles. Assign these. Prep the students. This will help them ask good questions. Panel discussion. We got here. We're all set for a panel. Well, are you going to be one of 5, one of 3? Understand what the dynamics are and how much time you're going to have. Think about what you can specially contribute to the panel. Who else is going to be on the panel? Is it going to be 3 other legalizers? What do you want to focus on? Is it a marijuana piece you want to focus on, a health piece, criminal justice piece? Thinking about what's your expertise, what economist, national security background. What is the piece you're speaking on behalf of? So student population, think about what the piece you can contribute. Also, what's the role of the moderator going to be? Is the moderator going to introduce you and just let you go? Is the moderator going to sit there with a clock and say, you got 1 minute left? Is the moderator going to ask questions? How's the Q&A piece of it all going to work? Literature, also known as collateral. Every event you go to, you got to bring literature because you want people to contact you. You got to have contact information. And then at the end, how often people come up to you and say, oh, your speech was so great. Wonderful. How do I get in touch with you? Collect cards, collect names and addresses, because you're building a political movement. That's ultimately what you're trying to do. in your literature, you want to be careful. You want it to look good. A lot of literature looks like shit. You don't want shitty-looking literature. No typos. No stoner profiles. Okay? Always overdress. Even if it's a rally. If you're a guy, put on a jacket. Put on a tie. We're trying in part to break stereotypes when we're representing normal. That's one of the challenges. Think about all the basic tools about speaking. When you stop, you gather people's attention. Gustav Mahler, the composer, said, if the audience is bored, slow down. That slowing down puts emphasis into what you're trying to say. You don't have to speak a mile a minute to make your point heard by everybody. That's a sign of a little bit of nervousness. You're not in control. So so we're conveying in our body language, in our tempo, am I in control of myself? Do I understand the material? Are you going to be confident in what I have to say? Don't read your PowerPoints. So now we're in a debate. Here's another kind of contact. We'd like you to debate somebody. So, okay, you've got to be respectful of your opponent. You've got to be, and your opponent's going to, I want to just give you some excerpts from a debate. How many of you know who Congressman Bob Barr is from Georgia? Raise your hand. Right. So Barr was one of the prosecutors of Bill Clinton at the impeachment trial. Former U.S. attorney. Snarling, attack type of guy. And so a Georgetown Criminal Law Review asked me to debate Bob Barr on the legalization of drugs. And so, he's the congressman, he goes first. Then I go, So at the end, the moderator says, well, thank you, Congressman Barr. You just heard Eric Sterling say that there's a need for treatment and regulation instead of the current focus on law enforcement. How would you respond? Congressman Barr, this is the transcript. Well, I do think that after listening to Eric, that Alice in Wonderland is alive and well, and she's standing right over here to my left. $34 million, that's all it's going to take. He took a number out of context that I used. Isn't that wonderful? $34 million. Juan, the moderator, the best way to answer your question is not to engage in some Pollyannish expedition of some Alice in Wonderland nirvana out there. I know that's mixing 3 or 4 different metaphors, but what the heck? That's at one point, Pollyannish, then the thing moves on. We've talked about the Swiss, and then, here's Barr speaking to me again. I have learned, however, that the Clinton approach to debate is alive and well. Notice the Clinton-esque twist of a turn that Eric uses. In response to the question whether or not any society has tried drug legalization, he has succeeded. He said, well, we can't answer that because no society has comprehensively tried it. I suppose the only time they will have comprehensively tried it is when he decides that they've met his criteria. Typical Clinton argument. So this is the way he goes on. So, well, at one point, sort of, he said, talking about Barr, he said, there's a public health argument to be made. It's appropriate for the government to take, but where's the balance? And I wanted to read actually something that Mr. Barr said at the Conservative Political Action Conference on January 23rd, 1999, in his speech against the onslaught, defending our vanishing right to privacy in America. And he goes right to this point. Mr. Barr told them, and I'm not going to be able to do it with all the appropriate inflection, I'm sure, he said, history, from the decline of the Roman Empire to the rise of Nazi Germany, it shows that taking away privacy is the first step in a series of dominoes that ends in a complete surrender of individuality and free will. Barr, sounds eloquent to me. Thank you. I would ask you to read it, but in the interest of time, I'll continue. After all, If the government always knows where you are, what job you are seeking, what doctor you are seeing, where you travel, how you spend your money, and how to defend yourself, and blah, blah, blah. And so I go on and I continue to quote him. And then I say, these rights we've been talking about here, Mr. Barr, and I happen to think Congressman Barr has been a leader, for example, in this area. He's been one of the most courageous members of Congress in resisting Echelon and Carnivore, and completely excessive taking of power by the FBI where they don't need it. There are many areas where I think that Congressman Barr is really far-seeing. What is so troubling to me is that he doesn't see that the principle he believes in apply to individuals who choose to use drugs. Barr later went to work for the Marijuana Policy Project as a lobbyist for marijuana legalization. Now, I would like to take all the credit for that conversion. But notice the difference in tone as he sneers and sneers. I mean, you want to get up and like bite his ankle, you know. But, you know, and Eric this and Eric that. Congressman Barr, Mr. Barr. That's, you know, in a debate, who ends up winning that debate? Not the sneering congressman, the wise guy who doesn't have anything to say but insults, but the gentleman. Building a coalition. A lot of our work involves building coalitions. Coalitions need clear objectives. If it's state legislation, what's your target of the coalition? Make sure that gets worked out. You've got other kinds of things to work on. If you're a student, you've got campus enforcement policy. Coalition politics are very hard. There's the challenge of the decision-making process. All of these kinds of things are challenges. Everybody wants to be the leader. Everybody wants to be the spokesperson. Let the best speakers be the spokespersons. Doesn't matter what group they're from. If they're able to articulate your issues well, if they're good, let them be the spokesperson. And that involves, you got to make compromises. You're a coalition. Recruiting allies. In your groups, in your coalition, brainstorm. Who might be allies? So thinking about what their concerns are. There will be people who won't join you. Don't say, oh, those chicken shits. The NRA, why don't they get involved with it? We can complain all we want about people who aren't our allies. Wasted energy. Don't waste our time. You're going to have a press conference. Be very careful thinking about this. Do you have something worth having a press conference about? Don't call a press conference if it isn't news. And essentially, what is the essence of news? News is the thing that brings out the response. Holy shit, that's news. If you hear, holy shit, that's news. Otherwise, oh God, it's the same old thing. Oh, oh, blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah is not news. Most of what's in the newspaper is blah, blah, blah. So you could flip to page 1 to page 10 and it's blah, 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 blah. Don't try to call a press conference for blah, blah. But you can create occasions. Think about, is there something you can study? All you essentially need to have a press conference is one fact in which somebody will say, holy shit. 1 in 3 black men under correctional control. Holy shit. Blacks are 8 times more likely to be incarcerated for drug offenses than whites. Holy shit. All you need is a study. You put it doesn't have to be a 1-page study, obviously, but getting to your conclusion. But the point is, you've got something where somebody will respond, and if it's on message, it's part of your process, think about it. Think about the location. You want to have photo ops. Think about all of that when you sort of organize your thing. How many of you have gotten calls from the press who want to know what Normal thinks about something? Raise your hand. Okay, so reporter calls it. Here I am, so-and-so. I'm calling from the Globe Star Gazette. I need, what's Normal's reaction to blah, blah? The governor just said blah, blah, blah. And your first reaction is, oh, my God, I got to make up something right here on the spot. Don't do that. Say, excellent, what's your name? Can I call you back in 5 minutes? Yeah, okay, sure. Okay, hang up the phone. You got the number. Now you stop and sort of say, what is the one most catchy thing that I can say in response to what the governor did? What's my message? Let me take a few, maybe I want to go and look up what the governor actually said. not hear what the reporter said the governor said. What did the governor say? What are other people saying about it? What are my allies saying about it? So I call him back in 10 minutes. I say, Governor Smith's comments reveal that he's changed his mind on marijuana legalization. We're 100% behind him, and we're endorsing him for re-election. Now, unlikely you're going to say that, but that's news. That catchy. Normal endorses Smith. Maybe that'll kill him. I don't know. But, think about what you want to say. How's it punchy? Now, rallies. You're going to be, somebody's going to say, we're going to have a rally. Maybe you want to have a rally, or somebody wants to invite you at a rally. Rallies are tough audiences. They're tough places to speak. How many of you have been to a rally? Oh, you've all been to rallies. How many have been to a rally where there are 30 people? Fucking waste of time. Don't, if you possibly can, a 30-person rally is a defeat. They called a rally, they got 30 of their friends to come. They couldn't get more than 30 people. I was at an anti-drug rally on the steps of the Fairfax County Police Headquarters Saturday. There were 30 people there. They had somebody from SAMHSA. They had somebody from the governor's anti-heroin prescription opioid task force. They had some people in recovery. Had a great speakers. They had me as the wind-up speaker talking about legalizing drugs, and 30 people. All the energy of the organizer goes into making sure I've got water bottles for the speaker. Do I have a sound system? If you can't build an audience, don't try to have a rally. If your friends are desperate to have a rally, think about an alternative. Well, just to say, if you have to go to a rally speech is not a lecture. You want the audience to laugh, to applaud, to cheer. You want to give them lines, because that's the point of a rally. It's about building energy. So your speech has got to be about we're going to win. We're going to take the State House. Marijuana is going to be legal, and everybody's going to have all the joints they can possibly want. Let's hear it. Yeah, right. So free the weed. Yes, free the weed. Think about what kinds of chants you can have. Or call and response. But think about ways that so the audience is engaged. It's like, thank God. I'm standing in the sun for some purpose. I'm part of this thing. I'm not passive. But what are the alternatives? You can't put together a big rally on your campus, in your town, in your county, in your desert, wherever it is you're located. So on your block. So other kinds of things. Put the same energy into something else. Maybe you have a phone banking. Maybe you just turn it into a fundraising event. Have a party. The same energy can be very, charge everybody $10. So then, so you raise $300. You haven't spent $1,000. So thinking about, other kinds of ways, show a movie, invite, there are lots of different kinds of, do tabling, lots of other activities you can do that can be successful that a rally won't be. Now let's talk about lobbying and meetings and so forth. All right, so you want to choose your lobbying target. You want to pick your relevant decision maker, somebody who's going to be involved. You don't go to the state assemblyman about rescheduling marijuana because it's not her call. You don't go to the congressman about getting a state medical marijuana bill passed. It's not her call. So you got to, if there's a bill in the Judiciary Committee, you target those people. Who do you target? You've got many more people you can target. Pick your priorities. Praise your supporters. Thank them. Compliment them. Now you got meetings. Now how many of you have met with your own state senator? How many of your own state representative? How many of you met with your own member of Congress? How many of you met with any of your senators, U.S. senators? Splendid, splendid. And how many of you have met with them, with any one of these more than 3 or 4 times? Right. You want to build relationships. My congressman, since before he ran for election, when I started talking about medical marijuana in the early 2000s, I've been talking about marijuana. He knows me. I'm the marijuana guy. I started telling him about something, and he said, "Oh, bong hits for Jesus." I mean, he made the connection, but, before I did, it's, build a relationship, be a source of credible information. In your meetings with them, be focused, plan. If you've not met with the member before, do some research, do some background. How do you, what, did we go to the same college? Did they have an interest in something you're interested in? Find out as much as you can about them to be able to sort of make a connection as part of, like, we're just the same folks, people like us. I'm people like you, you're people like me. We're building, because we want to build these relationships, because relationships are a key part of what the political process are. You want to have literature to leave behind. Part of your exercise, I understand from Alan, you've been given sort of a checklist of a whole bunch of issues. Think about putting together what just a 1 or 2 page thing is on one bill. Now, if it's a page long, you do not have to fill the page. You don't have to have 300 words because it's a page. How tight, how efficient can your piece be to get your key points across? Plan for the meeting, one ask. You don't go in and say, I want you to reschedule. I want amnesty. I want banking, and I want, the tax thing. I want it all. One meeting, one issue. So that, we want you to co-sponsor this bill. This is the argument for this bill. Think about it, and that's what we're going to say. Because it just becomes too scattershot. Their time and the time of their staff is so incredibly compressed. A member of Congress represents like 700,000 people. A senator represents 5, 8, 30 million people. They can't meet with all of you. You're lucky you've got some time. Don't waste it. Put together a delegation. You can't all speak. But you should all at least introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Eric Sterling. I live, in the 3rd Ward. Or, hi, I'm Eric Sterling. I'm a medical marijuana patient. Or, I'm Eric Sterling. My father used medical marijuana before he died. Or whatever kind of thing that connects. But you've got someone else who's your leader. Make sure you're brief and allow the staff or the member to ask questions. Make sure you've designated before you go someone's going to take notes. And because you want to be able, in the excitement of it, you're just thinking, what am I going to say next? How are they reaction? What's the body language? Make sure someone's there taking notes, recording, this is what they said. This was their reaction. So you can share that with the national office. They may ask you questions. So how many people in Montana are medical marijuana patients? Don't bullshit an answer. Let me get the latest data for you. And you go and you try to find out and you get back. And that gives you a reason to get back in touch with them. You follow up, make sure you thank them. If it's your member, let's say it's a member who you really admire, who's supporting you. Then you write a letter to the editor of the local paper saying how much you praise your friend and your ally. Another kind of context, town hall meeting. The congressman or senator is going to be in the front of the room. The room's going to be packed with people. They want to talk about everything from global warming to fracking to Amtrak to taxes to guns to abortion to education and health care. So you've got to, your issue is important. We know that. That's why you're here. That's why you came. But you're not entitled to monopolize the conversation. And people may not, other people may not think your issue is as important as they think theirs is. Don't get into a fight with them about that. Be respectful. Another kind of context, testimony. You're going to speak before a formal legislative body. It's the city council, the zoning commission, Congress. Now, in the case of Congress, you have to be invited. You can't, it's not like most other bodies where you can show up. So even if it's Congress, though, you can always submit a statement. So have copies at the table. Make sure if you're testifying before the State Judiciary Committee, how many copies do they need? They want copies in advance. They're going to put it in everybody's folder. Staff is going to read it. Make sure you have it in advance. It doesn't have to be long. Just has to be, it needs to be succinct, pointed. Make your points. Get advice from people. Consult with their allies. Think about what your unique story is. What's your unique piece? What is it that nobody else is going to say? You got 3 minutes. If there's praise you can make of the chair or a member, do it. Stop when your time is up. Don't try to talk over the buzzer. Be professional. Follow up. Encourage your allies and supporters to contact in terms of what's going on. Maybe you want to write a phone script. Stay positive. We've been, Keith, myself, Dan, Dale, many of us, we've been doing this a long time. And we do it, we love it. It's exciting. Take care of yourself, don't burn out. Make friends, have fun, and find the party in your heart. Thank you very much.
As chair of the executive board, I do a lot of shit. But I'm going to remember one really delightful thing I got to do, and that's present Eric Sterling with the Normal Lifetime Achievement Award.
Whoa.
Grateful recognition of a lifetime dedicated to reforming unjust marijuana laws and advancing the cause of personal freedom.
Are you tired of storing your herb in back alley baggies? Then keep your herb fresh and protected with Pottles. Pottles are airtight and odor-free. Not to mention they're reusable, BPA-free, and UV-resistant. Pottles come in a variety of sizes, styles, and colors, so go check out Pottles at mypottles.com. Use the code STASH to get an additional 10% off. Again, that's mypottles.com, mypottles.com, and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out LushLEDlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you.
Yeah, I don't have any visuals here, but let me talk about California. You know, every state is different, has different rules for how you deal with the legislature, different different politics, and everything else. California has really has been blessed, actually, with really good position on this issue for a long time, going back to the 70s. And it actually all started not from the state legislature. It rarely does. It started from an initiative of the people, the very first marijuana initiative, I think, on the planet, the California Marijuana Initiative of 1972, which was put on the ballot almost as a lark by a group that was called Amorphia, that later morphed into California Normal, and nobody expected to win. When it got 30% of the vote for free legal backyard marijuana in 1972, it actually got a lot of attention. Nobody dreamed that it would get 30% of the vote. And that set the stage for decriminalization, because at that time it was a felony to possess a joint in California and most other states, practically every other state in the country. Around that same time, I guess, Amorphia sort of hooked up with National Normal, and Keith Stroup here was working in Washington. We had a West Coast office headed by a gentleman named Gordon Brownell, an attorney who'd long political experience, had worked for Governor Ronald Reagan. He was and who took on lobbying for a decriminalization law in California. Because we had a sponsor, a willing sponsor, Senator George Moscone from San Francisco, decided that, given the surprisingly strong support for for making backyard marijuana legal, he could at least move to decriminalize it. Besides which, we were having all sorts of costs imposed by these by these prison terms that were coming down for minor marijuana offenses. So Gordon Brownell actually moved to the state capitol and resided there for like 2 years, working entirely on this bill, actually sharing an office with Senator Moscone. I'm not sure that would be considered legitimate anymore, but in those days it was. And that bill was passed and signed into law rather quietly and reluctantly, I must say, by then Governor Jerry Brown in his first go-round. That experience of getting that law on the books, one of the first, I think it was the second or third decriminalization law in the country, getting that done and creating a record of why decriminalization made sense and how expensive it was not to decriminalize, really left us at Normal, in California Normal, with a reputation in the state capitol that we have been able to draw on ever since as being sort of the experts, and from the consumer aspect on the marijuana issue, with knowledge, with real knowledge and facts that the legislature can use and look at. And we've had a policy of staying in good contact with the legislative leaders and committees who run this show ever since. And that has been key to a lot of our success at the state level. The key committees are the public safety committees in the state Senate and the California Assembly, where all of the crime legislation has to go through. And I would say for all but maybe 2 years since Gordon Brownell was there, we have had a strong ally as a chair of one or the others of those committees, either in the state Senate or in the Assembly. And that has enabled us to block an awful lot of bad legislation. And there was a lot of bad legislation, from 1976 up almost to 1996, we spent most of our time trying to combat efforts to roll back decriminalization, because the war on drugs started picking up under the Reagan administration, and there was a lot of pressure to tighten up on penalties again. And Keith mentioned we had this long drawn battle actually over the so-called smoke a joint, lose your license mandate that California had to deal with. Would we, modify our long-standing decriminalization law to require an automatic license suspension, driver's license suspension, for just possession off the road of marijuana? Well, we had this battle actually went on for at least 5 or 6 years. There were several rounds. There were temporary bills passed. We won some. We lost some, but we won in the end. Our real problem was that the governor was Governor Wilson, who, as a senator in Washington, D.C., had sponsored the original smoke a joint, lose your license federal mandate. So we had a governor who was just resolved not to opt out of this smoke a joint, lose your license, even though the states were allowed to do it. But we had this leadership in the legislature, Democratic leadership, who remained as committed to decriminalization as they had been all along. So I fought actually a pretty lonely battle at that time. There was really only one organization out there that was, speaking up on this whole issue, at least and that was us. So I made a practice, and this is very important. Whenever bills of any sort come up in the legislature, you send in some written testimony to get on the record about why you're in support or in opposition. Once you're on the record, you can testify, at least in California you can, and so often your testimony turns out to be very useful for the committee staffers who are writing the reports to the leadership. The other, back in those days, it was so simple. As I say, being the only organization out there opposing this, all I had to do was put out an announcement to our press list in Sacramento that, hey, the Public Safety Committee is going to be hearing the Smoke a Joint, Lose Your License bill. California Normal Air will be there to testify against it, and we're having a press conference outside the state capitol at 1 p.m. And sure enough, every time we get some cameras and microphones, get good publicity on this issue, and newspaper coverage as well. Being against a bill actually gives you some leverage in the rules of the California legislature anyhow, because when it comes to testifying, unlike the U.S. Congress and some state legislatures, there's halfway open public testimony on every bill in California. At least they allow a limited amount of testimony, like 3 speakers on each side. Usually the sponsor of the bill has their own selected people to speak on behalf of the bill. And when it's a bill from our side, actually, it's always good to have somebody who really represents the broadest possible constituency. So we used to like to have law enforcement people, if we could possibly get one, which we occasionally did, or doctors or medical marijuana patients when we were dealing with medical marijuana bills. But testimony on the pro side was generally managed by the sponsor. When you're testifying against it, it's sort of, you have an opportunity to walk up to the microphone, and if you're one of the first 3 people there, you can sit at the table and actually testify before the committee if you've sent your testimony in beforehand. So we would do that, and we've got very good opportunity to air our views to the committee and make it clear to the members of the Public Safety Committee why their chairman was well advised to oppose this smoke a joint, lose your license legislation or whatever else it was. And it's been very helpful to have this public access, which, as I say, does not exist in every state. But to do that, you've got to have a prepared statement. You've got to have a position on the bill and explain what you're doing, and you should make that position known even to the opponent. If you're opposing a bill, you should send your testimony in opposition to that opponent. And surprising what can happen that way. I just had a really unusual experience this year. I never quite had one like this before. Right now, the legislature, in fact today, is voting on a number of different possible medical marijuana regulation bills. And one of them is the one we're not particularly in favor of, naturally, is sponsored by law enforcement and the California League of Cities, local governments, basically. And when that bill was announced, it first published 2 or 3 months ago, we looked at it and immediately saw that no way would it work. It was way too restrictive. They'd never be able to get people to actually register with the state under the system they were proposing. Everybody would still remain illegal out here, and you'd have chaos. So we hastily assembled a coalition of actually all of the marijuana groups that we could round up in California on a joint letter that I wrote to the sponsor of this bill, Assemblyman Ken Cooley, explaining why his bill was such a disaster. And lo and behold, 3 hours after sending that letter off, I get a phone call. It says, "Hi, this is Ken Cooley. Could I speak to Dale Geringer?" I said, "Yes." Well, thank you for reaching out to me on this bill. We'd like to meet with you and discuss your problems. And so that indeed transpired. We've had a very productive and cordial a series of meetings and exchanges with Mr. Cooley's office, and I don't think we're going to get his bill fixed, because in order for his bill to be fixed, he has to get support from his sponsors, who, as I said, include law enforcement. However, there's another bill that is going to the same committee today. Assembly Appropriations is voting on these two alternative bills. There's the Cooley bill, and there's another bill that we very much support by a local Assemblyman, Rob Bonta, and they are, the legislature is going to choose between those bills, but it looks like we're in a position where perhaps Mr. Cooley and our friend Mr. Bonta are going to be able to negotiate on this bill, because even though there's major differences between the two bills, one is good and one is bad, there's also a lot of room for compromise to put this together, and so that may very well happen. We have a very fluid situation regarding medical marijuana, but it's important always to respect your enemy and your opponent. So the letter I wrote of opposition I wrote to Mr. Cooley was very cordial and professional. You'd never be insulting to them or to their views or call their ideas stupid or anything like that. Just point out problems that exist in it and why they need to be fixed. And you'd be surprised how far you can go with some just downright courtesy and respect for other people. Because, even if other people we think are wrong on this issue, they usually have their reasons. And it's good to get to know them and find out what their reasons are, and sometimes you can turn this around. And sometimes these reasons are nothing more than a very simple fact, like this particular legislator is totally dependent on support from law enforcement in his campaign. And in California, I got to say, that has been the major stumbling block to any reform at all, has been a very powerful law enforcement lobby, led at least until this year by a longtime lobbyist named John Lovell, who has the ability, if there's any bill he doesn't like, he can get the sheriffs and police chiefs of all of the cities and counties in a particular legislator's district to call that legislator and say, don't vote for that bill. And he can say absolute nonsense about what the bill does. It doesn't matter. They will not vote for that bill. People have wondered why we haven't gone farther on regulating medical marijuana, for example, in California, the way they did in Colorado. Colorado, for some reason, had a nice bipartisan consensus in the legislature. Republicans and Democrats both saw it as a problem that they needed to regulate medical marijuana, and they agreed to work on it, and a bipartisan bill was passed. In California, that was impossible because law enforcement was dead set opposed. The Republican caucus is committed to law enforcement, so the Republicans have voted pretty much unanimously against any marijuana reform bill whatsoever, no matter how sensible it is, as sort of a partisan matter ever since. Occasionally we'll peel off one or two Republican votes. Fortunately, it doesn't matter that much because the legislature is close to 2/3 Democrat. But on the Democrat side, we have the problem of there's a broad spectrum of opinion even within the Democratic Party. Although you should know, by the way, the California Democratic Party has endorsed a marijuana legalization, specifically in its platform. But although the party has endorsed that, doesn't mean that it's taken that seriously by individual legislators. And we have a lot of legislators in California who are from districts that are queasy about this issue. And the quease comes from the perceived chaotic lack of regulation that is out there at the present time. And this is a very local issue where you have, dispensaries that are seen opening, running amok in totally inappropriate environments, attracting clientele from outside the neighborhood, often, located near, a school or a church, or maybe just another business which doesn't like the traffic that gets that they see associated with it. And a lot of these operators, there's thousands, there's at least 1,500 different dispensary operators in California, most of whom are operating illegally, and most of whom, because they are operating illegally, are not very well regarded in their local community or by their legislators. Now, fortunately, the industry has started to get it together thanks to a few years of effort here, actually first starting with ASA, and more recently we have the California Cannabis Industries Association, which is part of the National Cannabis Industries Association, as well as the Emerald Growers Association, a new, very strong voice for growers up in our Emerald Triangle, where a lot of America's marijuana is produced. And they've come together, and they have finally got enough respectable operators ready to line up and pony up and say, yes, hey, we are growing marijuana, we want to do it legally, we're willing to submit to a sensible regulation system, here's what such a system would look like, please, make us legal. That is turning out to be a very productive and effective tactic. Another very important and effective tactic that has come up has been support for, monetary support for campaigns, to tell you the truth. This has gotten just a lot worse in the time that I've been working on this issue, but now it's really become so crass that practically every time a congressman, a congressional office, or a congressman interacts with, it's followed up by, at some point, by some sort of an invitation to a fundraiser for that congressman. Well, it's a good idea, actually, to go to some of these fundraisers, and it's especially good idea to go to candidates forums, and if there's an open seat somewhere or a contested seat, to go, and there's a candidate there who you think might perhaps be open or helpful on the issue, to go up, go to that, introduce yourself personally, and explain your interest in the issue, and maybe get them on board. Because the more of those personal kinds of contacts we make, and the more heft we have, and frankly, the more campaign donations too, which is a little bit chilling, because a lot of the money, of course, in cannabis is increasingly coming from an industry which, at the present time, still, I think, has the interests of consumers pretty much at heart. I mean, I think our interests as consumers are pretty much identical to those of the industry at present, but that isn't necessarily going to remain the case forever. And we've seen instances in California where a cabal of local industry operators, local dispensaries in a particular city or county, will sort of conspire to have a very restrictive ordinance that only allows them to operate and excludes other people. This is coming up more and more, and it really makes the situation difficult for us, I got to say. A word or two on contacting the legislature. Things have changed a lot over the years, but we used to work on sort of on a paper-based system, and tried to get mail sent in to legislators and congresspeople. We would have mail letter writing parties. We would have postcards that people could sign, pre-addressed postcards that they could send in, and that has become sort of obsolete, the way the mails have, and especially if you're dealing with Congress, all the mails here are screened for bugs and poison and stuff like that beforehand, and don't arrive until weeks later anyhow. So it is it's strongly disrecommended that you use that anymore as a way of communicating. The way I like to communicate on an emergency basis with important decision makers like committees and wavering votes is by fax, actually. Faxes get read. And not many people do faxes, and probably not a lot of people out here have faxes, but if you've got one, it can be very effective. At least it works well in California. Then, of course, there's the email bomb. Which was gets less effective with each passing day as more and more of these bombs precipitate. Now, the legislative offices routinely getting hundreds and hundreds of emails. They'll have a staffer who may count the number of emails that refers to a particular bill, but that's about the best they can do on that, unless you're dealing with a particular staffer, and rather than dealing with a congressional office email, you deal with a staffer's email and say, oh, hey, I'd like to set up a meeting at such and such a time, or can the bill be changed to do such and such and such? And if you have a personal relationship with an office staffer or a legislator for that matter, then you can get some attention, but otherwise it's pretty hard to get through that way. However, I will say that normal salsa alerts were tremendously helpful on some occasions. In the last 3 or 4 legislatures, we had to deal with zero tolerance DUI bills that would make it illegal to make you automatically DUI if you tested with any marijuana at all detectable in your system. Now, we all know what's wrong with this. And if we don't all know, ask Paul Armentano over there, who's an expert on this issue. And I myself have been something of an expert on this issue as well, about how you really cannot judge intoxication by any kind of chemical test. It was using the kind of information and knowledge that Paul and Cal Normal and others had compiled, getting that to the relevant committees over the last 3 or 4 years that was really helpful in opposing these bills. But the other thing was, those issues were really the kinds of things that we could send out salsa alerts to our members to, hey, stop zero tolerance DUI bill. And we got close to, I think, 2,000 emails generated through the salsa listserv here in California. That is actually a very good response for anything at the state level. Yes. Okay. So I was worried that I wouldn't have enough to say. It seems like I've said enough. So with that, let me pass on to the next.
It's Halloween Day here on the Audio Stash, and we have some nice holiday-appropriate comedy and music for you later in the program. But first today, we have the story of real-life zombies. That's right, the real horror out there is the attack of the primitive people. Joining us today is Dr. Robert Malamud, one of the world's top researchers into our endogenous cannabinoid system and the roles and function of our cannabinoid receptors. Dr. Malamud is the former chair of the biology department at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, where he's currently professor of biology and continues his essential and groundbreaking scientific research. Dr. Bob is a regular speaker at normal
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
free your planet.